Brit-Am. Brit-Am is the name of our organization. Brit-Am, Hebrew Awareness.
Right. Oh, yeah, sure. Yes.
Brit-Am means
Mm-hmm.
covenant people, and that's what we are for. That's what we're doing. We're going to talk about our subjects that concern us. I'll be giving a short talk in a few minutes on concerning the names, the giving of the names in the book of Genesis to the tribes. The book is concerning the naming of the tribes, and it's based on the book of Genesis, chapter 35, and it concerns the names of the tribes and how they got their names. It was Jacob. Jacob was in the land of Israel. Jacob took, or a subterfuge, he took the blessing from Esau, and Esau consequently wanted to kill him. And Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau, became aware of this, and she spoke to Isaac, the father of both sons of Jacob and Esau, and they agreed that Jacob should be sent away. So Jacob was sent away to Brit-Am. He was sent away to Laban. Laban was the brother of his mother. In other words, to his uncle. The word Laban means white. So he may have been a white man. That doesn't mean that everyone there was a white man, but it does show that white men were present amongst them, which is a curiosity worth knowing. At all events, Jacob went to stay in the house of Laban, Brit-Am, and whilst he was there, he worked for Laban, and he asked and he came to an agreement with Laban that he should work for 7 years, looking after his flocks, looking after his whole enterprise. Worked for him 7 years, and in exchange he would receive Rachel. Laban had 2 daughters, Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah were his 2 main daughters. He also had 2 other daughters from lesser wives, maidservants, Zilpah and Bilhah. Zilpah was a maidservant of Leah, and Bilhah was a maidservant of Rachel. Altogether, there were 4 daughters of Laban were present. And it had been agreed that Jacob should work for 7 years, and then at the end of those 7 years, he should receive Rachel as his wife. So in the course of the marriage ceremony, somehow or other, Laban managed to switch Leah, the elder daughter, for Rachel, whereas Rachel was the one that Jacob had intended to work for. And this only became apparent to Jacob in the morning. Why this was so complicated, but apparently it was possible, feasible, that such an event could occur. So Laban placated Jacob. And he said, you know what, finish this week. We have a ceremony, celebrations for the wedding, 7 days. Finish the 7 days. And at the end of the 7th days, not only will you have Leah remain your wife, but I'll also give you Rachel. You have 2 of them. And in exchange, you'll work for another 7 years for me. So Jacob agreed. And so Jacob agreed. And Leah was his wife, and so was Rachel. And Leah was disgruntled. Apparently, Jacob did not treat her as he should have, or did not treat her with the same respect that he gave to Rachel. And Leah was disappointed. But she got pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. She called the son Reuben. The Reuben means a son. In other words, I've been exonerated. God has given me a son. And this shows that I am important. I am given a male heir. I was a firstborn son to my husband. And this set me up. This is, as if to say, redeem my honor. And she called him Reuben, see my son, Reuben. And Reuben later, when he grew up, he behaved inappropriately with Bilhah, the concubine of his father. And as a result, it was removed from the firstborn right. The firstborn right was taken away from him. But even so, he is often recorded, when Reuben is recorded, is mentioned time and time again that he was the firstborn, as if he still kept the title. The title still had something and it was importance to him. The whole of his a major aspect of his character was encompassed in this title, the firstborn son. And we find that, so here we have a bit of a confusion here, because we later find that Judah was prominent. We also find that Joseph was prominent. So who was who? What type of hierarchy did we have? So the Bible tells us a little bit, gives us some light on it. 1 Chronicles chapter 5, beginning from verse 1, that says, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. So that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright. But Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, were Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. And as we said, we often find that whenever we find the name Reuben, or not every time, but often it is recalled, repeated, that Reuben was the firstborn. Genesis 35:23 says, the sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. Genesis 46:8, now these were the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons who went to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's firstborn. Even though technically, had the firstborn right, is always mentioned time and time again. Genesis 49:3. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might in the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and excellency of power. Exodus 6:14. These are the heads of the fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. Numbers 1:20. Now the children of Reuben, Israel's oldest son. Numbers 26:5. Reuben was the firstborn of Israel. Chronicles 5. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. 1 Chronicles 5:3. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. And so we have this repetition of the emphasis on Reuben being the firstborn. And this was part of the character of Reuben, of his future character. It was not just a title, it also reflected his attitude to life. Having the title of Reuben entails a sense of entitlement, as well as dignity, self-respect, duty, and expectations that things should proceed in a logical order. You are the firstborn, and you were born this way, and there is a certain order to the world, and things should go along a certain path and in a rational way. That is a quality of Reuben. We identify the descendants of Reuben as primarily living in France, but also amongst other nations, but primarily in France. France in Hebrew is known as Zarephath. In the book of Abijah, the biblical book of Abijah, it is said, especially in the Hebrew, that Zarephath is where the lost 10 tribes are. If you read the Hebrew according to the translations, according to the meaning of the Hebrew, this first exile, as Rashi explains, Jesus referring to the first lost 10 tribes who are in the land known as France, that is Zarephath. And the other commentators say the same thing. So this is an important principle in understanding this work. Also, even according to biblical codes, we have the names of the children of Reuben listed. The names of the children of Reuben listed, and listed in Numbers, and the name Zarephath, meaning France, is intersected by them. And this is as good as you can get. This is like as strong a proof as possible, according to the biblical codes, which is possible, which you can have. All events, then we have Simeon. Named Simeon, after Reuben came Simeon. Genesis 29:33. And she conceived again and bare a son, said, because the Lord has heard what I was hated, if therefore give me this son, also he called his name Simeon. Simeon is the root Shema. Listen here. And Simeon connotes here, listen to my oppression, to my indignity. And descendants of Simeon, they're scattered all over, and they are connected to the principle of hearing. They are easily irritated and excitable, but they have value of their own. We find the Simeon to be scattered throughout the Israelite nation, some of them with the Jews, some also amongst the Irish and the Welsh, also in Finland, and possibly also in Lombardy in Italy. Simeon, as we said, is excitable. He acts and thinks as he hears. And then we have Levi. Genesis 29:34, she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons, therefore his name was called Levi. Levi. Levi means accompaniment. Levi, to accompany. And the Levites accompany. They served in the temple. They were guards and they were singers, and the music accompanies a person that goes with him. Levites were also teachers. They guide, they follow along. They were instructors. And they were supposed to receive a second type from much of the agricultural produce, so they would also be following, keeping abreast with how things were going in the agricultural sector. Most Levites are now amongst the Jews. We also find enclaves of them possibly in northern Italy, also in Wales. And the Wales love singing, and that was a particular quality of the Levites, the singing in choirs. And also, the Levites are very strong in learning Torah. Quite a few of the individuals who have immersed themselves in Brit-Am researchers feel that they are associated, possibly descend from Levi. So it's worth knowing Moses came from Levi. The Levites have 2 sections, the Cohen, that is the priests, and the Levites, the ordinary Levites. After that we have Judah. Genesis 29:35, she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, now I praise the Lord, therefore she called his name Judah. Judah, and then bearing. The name Judah cannot praise, and also acknowledgement, owning up, telling the truth, acknowledging the faith. And then also the name Judah has all the names, the 4 names of the name of God, plus the Dalet letter, which has the D sound. Because in Hebrew, the letters U and V are both represented by the sign for V, the V sign. They're interchangeable. So all of these letters all comprise the holy name of God, plus a D sound, which turns it into Yehuda. After that, we have Dan. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied. Rachel is Rahel. Rachel envied and said, no, do Jacob, give me children or else I die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in God's stead who have held from you the fruit of the womb, and so on. And the name, Bilhah. So Rachel gave Bilhah to Jacob, and Jacob took Bilhah as an extra wife, and Bilhah conceived and bare Yaakov a son, and he was named Dan. And the name Dan means judgment. We find Dan in Denmark, we find enclaves of Dan also in Wales and in Britain and in Ireland. After that, Bilhah gave birth to another son, Naphtali, and Naphtali. And when Naphtali was born, Rachel said, with great wrestlings I wrestled with my sister. There was a ongoing competition between Rachel and they, the 2 major wives. And I prevailed, and she called his name Naphtali. And the name Naphtali in Hebrew cannot wrap around union or joining or wrestling. Naphtalites settled in Norway and also in Ireland. Naphtali and Dan were both sons of Bilhah, and descendants of Naphtali and Dan historically seem to have been in the same areas. And Naphtali is a messenger, and he has alacrity, and he is also alacrity is fast, and also he is eloquent. And we find these attributes amongst the Irish. They are known for their eloquence and also Irish dancing and Irish music as quickness and coordination of the feet, which they are known for. And Irish literacy is outstanding. Irish music and dance is also well known. And per head of population, Ireland made its mark in literature, music, and dance more than any other country. And this is what we have. And Norway has not so much known for these qualities, but in ancient times, Norway was known to as Thula or Tula, and this cannot speaker or speech. In other words, they sometime in the past they were known for their eloquence, though they haven't practiced it enough apparently in recent days. After that, we get Gad. Gad, when Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah maid and gave Jacob to wife. So this is Zilpah. This is a handmaiden of Leah. She bare Jacob a son. She called his name Gad. The name Gad is related to the word troop or gedud, a group. Gad in the biblical Hebrew was also pronounced as Goth. So Goth is sent from Gad. And so do many of the people in Sweden. And Gad can also mean good luck. It can mean a guardian angel or a spiritual agent, a kind of angel. A guardian angel even. We have a Rabbi Reuben Chaim Klein just wrote an essay, "God luck to you," explaining this. So it's worth going into the linguistic points. And God is from the word meaning gedud, clinging together, and the descendants of God, whom we can identify in Sweden, have this quality of clinging together, of thinking things out together, and of coming to group decisions. And then we have Asher. Zilpah was the brother of Gad. Asher was the brother of Gad. Zilpah's handmaiden bare Jacob a second son, and Leah said, "Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed." She called his name Asher. Asher means happiness. And he traced Asher to Scotland and also to Scandinavia and also to Ireland. And many of Asher also settled in the area of Manasseh, and therefore we find many from Asher in the USA. And even in biblical times, Manasseh was the most important, or the second place after Ephraim. Manasseh was always important even then, and there were other tribes who were in the domain of Manasseh, we could say. At all events, that was Asher. Asher means happiness. We have Yisachar, and Yisachar, we find that Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest, and he found mandrakes in the field. Mandrakes are a type of plant supposed to have aphrodisiac qualities, or to give hence fertility, to enable women to get pregnant, get in the family way, one could say. And he brought these mandrakes, dudayim, they called in Hebrew, dudayim. He brought them to his mother Leah, and Rachel asked Leah that if she was prepared to give the mandrakes to her, and Leah said, "I will, on condition that our husband, you let me have this night with our husband." Apparently Rachel was supposed to have that night, so she said, okay, so she gave her husband for that night to Leah, and they got pregnant from it. And so Leah called the son born of this union Issachar, meaning give a reward. And the Naziv, a famous commentator, he quotes from the Talmud that the mothers, the matriarchs, when they were given these names, they were doing it through a ruach, through a spirit of prophecy. They were divinely inspired, and these names have a significance. So Issachar was the name given them, and Issachar means payment, reward. We find the descendants of Issachar in Finland and also in Switzerland. And then we have Zebulun. And Zebulun was also born from Leah. And Leah gave the name Zebulun, and Zebulun can make fertile dwelling. And we find that Zebulun became many amongst people in the Netherlands. And even the map of Ptolemy, we find the presence of the Sabbaline Goy in northern Frisia, which eventually became part of the Netherlands. Sabbaline Goy means people of Zebulun in northern dialects, and also in Hebrew, Sabbaline Goy. And the Z was pronounced as an S in those times in the north. And then we have Dinah. Dinah was the daughter. She was the daughter to Leah, and the name Dinah means possibly related to Dan, the same as the tribe of Dan, meaning judgment. And after that, we have Joseph. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bare a son, said, God had taken away my reproach. She called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. The Lord shall add to me another son. using the same word Yosef there, Yosef, me. And that is increase and add. What does it mean, add another son? So he's destined to give birth to another son, Benjamin. But she wasn't necessarily referring to this. What she meant that from this birth, the birth of this son, or will have another son. In other words, this son was Joseph. Joseph was destined to give birth to Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim and Manasseh would have become separate tribes in their own right. In other words, when Rachel gave birth to Joseph, she gave birth to an additional member, an additional tribal head, not only Joseph, but from Joseph, the two sons of Joseph. In other words, there were two of them, two tribes were added through this one birth. That is what the verse is apparently connoting. And so on Rachel, and then they moved. And then Jacob took all of his wives and his children, and he fled from Laban because Laban wasn't treating him correctly. They came to the land of Israel, and they settled in the land of Israel. And when they were journeying through the land of Israel, when they came close to Bethel, and they're close to Ephrathah, Rachel was again pregnant, and she died giving birth to another son. And she called his name Ben-Oni. His father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Benjamin was prominent amongst the Jews, also amongst the Belgium, the Normans, Norwegians, and Benjaminites were known as aristocratic, militaristic, great warriors, experts, slingshots, marksmen. And then there were also apparently a lot of left-handed people amongst the sons of Benjaminites, and Benjamin had the quality, even though Benjamin was the son of Rachel. Therefore, he was closer physically and according to his birth to Joseph. But nevertheless, it was Benjamin out of all the sons who stayed attached to Judah, who identified with Judah, became part of Judah. Hillel, one of the greatest scholars in the Talmud, maybe of all time, Hillel, according to his own traditions, through his father was descended from Benjamin, and through his mother from the house of David of Judah. And so we have this, and the name. What does the name connote? The name that Rachel wanted to give to Benjamin can be understood to say Ben-Oni, son of my suffering, but also has another significance. Oni also means power or sexual prowess, ability. The son of my power, the person who will put my name amongst the tribes of Israel. That was Benjamin. And Yaakov called him Benjamin, and other words, the son of my right hand, that he should have ability to do things that others couldn't. Benjamin was a difficult person. Benjamin has certain qualities that other tribes don't have, and he has disabilities that other tribes do not have. And this is also found that a lot of people in Benjamin were left-handed, not all of them, but a lot of them. Apparently is not unusual. And the left-handed people, I know I'm left-handed. Left-handed people sometimes have difficulty. They have less coordination, they have difficulty with this, difficulty with that. But in other matters, it is an advantage. So this fits the very name that Benjamin received. So that is what we have. It is in a nutshell, but it's important, it's interesting, and it shows what we have.